I used to think that hard work was enough, that if I kept my head down, stayed polite, and did my job without complaining, the world would eventually reward me. Naive, right? The first day I walked into Vanguard Technologies, I was full of hope. A fresh college graduate with honors, hungry to prove myself. Sure, the job offer was for a receptionist position, not exactly the corner office I had dreamed of, but I told myself it was temporary, a foot in the door. 5 years later, that same door slammed shut in my face every single day. I became invisible. No one cared about the girl behind the desk. No one remembered my name. To them, I was just the receptionist, the one who answered phones, fetched coffee, and smiled at every dismissive glance and eye roll. It became a running joke around the office. They didn't even try to hide it. "Oh, Madison? She's sweet, but she's just the receptionist." I heard it all. I absorbed every humiliating comment, every condescending smirk. But the worst came from Derek Walsh, the king of arrogance himself. Derek was the CEO, tall, charming, and insufferably smug. He walked the halls like he owned the air we breathed. In a way, he did. To Derek, people weren't individuals. They were stepping stones, tools, or in my case, background noise. The day he humiliated me in front of the entire company will forever be burned into my memory. It was during an emergency all-hands meeting. Vanguard was struggling, the tech industry was shifting fast, and we were being left behind. The room was tense, filled with execs arguing over what to cut, who to blame, and how to stay afloat. For once, I felt brave. I had been reading up on digital marketing and operational costs. I saw opportunities no one else did. So I raised my hand. My voice trembled slightly, but I spoke anyway. If we shift part of our marketing budget into more scalable digital platforms and streamline some internal expenses, we might... That was as far as I got. Derek laughed, not politely, not subtly. He laughed like I was the punchline of a cruel joke. "Madison," he interrupted, smirking as he turned to the entire room. "You're the receptionist. Leave the big ideas to the grown-ups." The room erupted with laughter. Executives, managers, even the interns. I stood there, face burning, feeling a mix of humiliation and pure, boiling rage. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't vent to friends or drown my sorrows in ice cream. Instead, I made a decision. They thought I was nothing? Fine. I'd show them what nothing could become. I spent my nights studying. I devoured books on finance, investments, mergers, and acquisitions. I watched videos, took online courses, attended free webinars. Every spare second outside work became part of my personal transformation. They went to happy hours. I went to seminars. They posted vacation selfies. I read market trends and learned negotiation tactics. Years passed. Quietly, strategically. While they mocked me, I built something they couldn't see. My modest salary wasn't much, but I saved aggressively. I made smart investments. I built relationships with people in high places, investors, consultants, even former executives from other companies. No one in Vanguard knew that just the receptionist was growing powerful behind the scenes. Then, opportunity came knocking. Vanguard hit rock bottom. Poor leadership, outdated products, and Derek's ego had finally caught up with them. Stock prices nosedived. Morale was in the gutter. Investors were desperate. And I was ready. Through my network, I partnered with a private equity firm. We made an offer, a big one. Enough to buy controlling interest in Vanguard. Enough to force a change in leadership. Enough to make me, yes, me, the new CEO. I didn't sleep the night the deal closed. I just stared at my reflection in the mirror, whispering the words I had waited years to say. "You're not just the receptionist anymore." The following morning was poetic. A mandatory meeting was called. Derek strolled in, oblivious as ever, adjusting his designer cufflinks. When he saw me sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by board members and legal teams, his smirk faltered. "What is this?" he demanded. I stood slowly, deliberately. The room fell silent. "Derek," I said calmly, "you're being relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Vanguard is under new management." His face went pale. He tried to argue. To call the board, to flex whatever power he thought he still had. But it was over. The papers had been signed. The votes had been cast. I owned Vanguard now. As security escorted him out, he turned back, glaring at me like I had stabbed him in the back. Maybe I had, but he never cared when he stepped on others to climb. Why should I? I faced the rest of the executive team. Some looked nervous, others looked downright terrified. I smiled sweetly. For those wondering, I said, "Yes, I'm Madison, the receptionist, the girl you ignored, the one you laughed at." I let that hang in the air for a beat before finishing. And starting today, I'm your boss. No one laughed this time. The silence after Derek was escorted out was deafening. You could practically taste the fear in the room. I sat there, legs crossed, hands clasped together calmly on the table, while executives who once didn't even make eye contact with me now couldn't look away. They didn't know how to process it. Madison Clark, the girl they used to hand their dry cleaning slips to, was now in charge. And I made sure they felt every second of that reality. I understand this is unexpected, I said, my tone deliberately measured. But let's get one thing clear. I didn't come here for revenge. That was a lie, of course. This was revenge. Every single word I spoke now was dipped in the poison they all deserved. I came here because this company deserves better leadership, and from now on, incompetence and arrogance will no longer be tolerated. A few heads dropped. Good. Let them squirm. In the following weeks, I wasted no time. Derek's cronies, those executives who used to laugh the loudest at his jokes and at my expense, were the first to go. They were useless anyway, overpaid, underperforming, and loyal to a toxic regime. One by one, I called them into my office, the same office I wasn't even allowed to walk past before. Effective immediately, your position has been terminated, I told them coldly, watching their faces pale. Some begged, some got angry. Some tried to remind me of good times. I reminded them of the times they left me to clean up after their mess or humiliated me during team meetings. Save your energy, I said more than once. You'll need it for your job search. Cleaning house felt good, but that wasn't my ultimate goal. My real focus was fixing the company. Under my leadership, Vanguard pivoted quickly. I brought in fresh blood, hungry, smart, and humble people who actually cared about innovation. We slashed bloated expenses, streamlined product development, and launched 2 new services that skyrocketed our user base. Within 6 months, we were profitable. Again. Within a year, our stock price had more than doubled. I became the face of the turnaround. Business magazines that once overlooked me now called me the Dark Horse CEO. Investors loved me. Employees respected me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just anything. I was Madison Clark, the woman who saved Vanguard. And then, just when I thought the past was firmly behind me, Derek Walsh came crawling back. It happened on a gray Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing expansion proposals when my assistant buzzed in. Madison? You might want to come? Down to reception. Someone's here asking to see you. I raised an eyebrow. Who? There was a long pause. It's Derek Walsh. For a brief moment, I almost laughed, but curiosity got the better of me. I made my way down, passing through the very lobby where he used to breeze past me without a second glance. And there he was. Gone was the custom-tailored suit and smug grin. Derek looked defeated. His hair was disheveled, his suit was cheap, his eyes, once so full of disdain, were desperate. Madison, he said, voice cracking slightly. You look, well, I am, I replied flatly, arms crossed. What do you want, Derek? He shifted uncomfortably. I heard about the company's success. I've been having a tough time lately. Things didn't exactly work out after, well, I was hoping maybe there's a spot for me here. I know Vanguard inside and out. I can help. He actually said it. He actually stood there after everything and asked me for a job. I didn't get angry. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I gave him the same cold, dismissive tone he once used. On me. Derek, I began slowly, savoring every word. You're the last person I'd hire. Not because of what you did to me, though let's be honest, that's reason enough, but because you represent everything this company left behind. Arrogance, complacency, toxic leadership. His face fell. Come on, Madison. Don't do this. I tilted my head, feigning sympathy. Oh, Derek, with all due respect, this is grown-up business talk. Maybe you should leave this to the adults. His eyes widened. He recognized his own words, the same ones he had used to humiliate me years ago. Now, they tasted bitter in his mouth. Security approached to escort him out. I gave them a slight nod, as he was led away. Derek glanced back one last time, his eyes pleading. But I was already turning around, walking confidently back toward the elevator. I didn't need to watch him go. I already knew the ending. Once he made me feel small, insignificant, forgettable. Today I made sure he knew exactly who I was. I was Madison Clark, the girl who bought his company, the girl who took everything he thought was his, the girl he would never laugh at again. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be, in charge, in control. No more fake smiles behind a front desk, no more swallowing insults from arrogant men in suits. I sat at the head of the boardroom table now, the same table where Derek once silenced me. The same table where laughter echoed at my expense. Those days were over. Vanguard Technologies was mine. But power, I quickly learned, wasn't about titles or corner offices. It was about decisions, and those decisions came fast and hard. The first few months were pure chaos. I replaced nearly half the executive team. Not because I wanted to, but because they weren't part of the vision I had for this company. Their mindset was poisoned, stuck in an era of excess and ego. I needed innovators, fighters, people who weren't afraid of change. So I hired fresh blood. Young, hungry talents who respected ideas over hierarchy. I rebuilt teams from the ground up, demanding transparency, efficiency, and creativity. At first, people were terrified of me. Some thought I was ruthless. Others called me cold. I didn't care. Respect was non-negotiable now. And fear, as I learned, was often the first step to earning it, and it worked. Within months, Vanguard transformed. Revenue climbed, investors cheered, and media outlets hailed me as the CEO nobody saw coming. I became the face of modern leadership. The girl once mocked as just the receptionist was now celebrated as a visionary. But success came with shadows. The higher I rose, the lonelier it became. Old colleagues kept their distance, unsure of how to talk to me now. Friends I once confided in treated me like I was untouchable. Even my own staff walked on eggshells, fearing my wrath if they disappointed me. Power wasn't intoxicating. It was isolating. I spent more nights in the office than in my own home. My apartment gathered dust while I stayed up late reviewing reports and strategies. Sometimes I stared out the window of my office, wondering if this was what I really wanted all along. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself why I started. I didn't take over Vanguard just to play nice. I didn't endure years of humiliation just to settle for mediocrity. I took this company, and this crown, because they told me I couldn't, and I would be damned if I ever let anyone take it from me. But just as I found my rhythm, the universe, in its twisted sense of irony, decided to test me. It started small. Anonymous complaints about my aggressive leadership style. Whispers in board meetings that I was too emotional and too hands-on. I knew exactly where it was coming from, the old guard. Former executives I had fired, disgruntled and bitter, now spreading poison in the industry. At first, I ignored. It let them talk, I thought. Results spoke louder than rumors. But the murmurs grew. Journalists began circling. Investors asked subtle but loaded questions about company culture. Competitors saw an opportunity to pounce, and then came the final blow. A letter. Not from an enemy. Not from the media. From inside. A group of senior managers had secretly banded together. They sent a formal letter to the board accusing me of fostering a hostile work environment. They demanded a vote to remove me as CEO. It was betrayal. Plain and simple. These were people I had promoted. people I trusted, people who owed their careers to my leadership. For a brief moment, I felt that familiar sting of humiliation again. The same sting I felt when Derek laughed at me years ago. Was history repeating itself? Was I about to be ousted from the empire I built? No, not this time. I wasn't that naive receptionist anymore. I was Madison Clark. And if they thought they could take me down that easily, they clearly hadn't been paying attention. I called an emergency board meeting that very night. Calm, collected, ruthless. I presented data, undeniable proof of Vanguard's growth under my rule. I showed testimonials from employees who thrived in the new culture. I exposed the true motives of my accusers, many of whom were facing termination for poor performance. By the time I was done, the board was silent. No one voted me out. In fact, they reaffirmed their trust in me. But I wasn't done. I terminated every single person involved in that coup attempt, effective immediately. No severance, no second chances. When word spread through the company, something changed. Fear? Maybe. But also respect. They finally understood. Madison Clark wasn't just the receptionist. Madison Clark was the queen now, and in my kingdom, betrayal had consequences. Victory was sweet, but it didn't last long. Within weeks of crushing the mutiny inside Vanguard, a new threat emerged. And this time, it wasn't from bitter former employees or jealous managers whispering in dark corners. No, this was far bigger. This was war. It began quietly. A rival company, Titanic Solutions, started poaching some of our top engineers. At first, I brushed it off. It's normal in tech. Employees jump ship all the time. But then came the price slashes. Titanic's released a competing product eerily similar to ours, at half the price. They undercut us in every major market. Overnight, we lost key clients. Our sales team scrambled, but the damage was done. And if that wasn't enough, rumors began to circulate in the industry. Not the petty gossip about me being too ambitious or cold. No, this was calculated. Headlines appeared online. Vanguard's CEO lacks vision in shifting market. Former receptionist faces her biggest test yet. Can Madison Clark handle real competition? I knew exactly who was behind it. Eric Voss, the ruthless CEO of Titanic's. He was everything Derek had pretended to be. Brilliant, manipulative, and utterly merciless. While Derek ruled through arrogance, Eric ruled through strategy. He didn't laugh at me. He didn't mock me. He simply wanted to destroy me, and worse, he was good at it. Investors grew restless. Stock prices wavered. Board members, though still publicly supportive, began scheduling private discussions without me. I could feel the knives sharpening behind my back. I spent sleepless nights in my office, poring over data, strategizing. Titanic's was faster, cheaper, and growing hungrier. And deep down, I knew why. They didn't just want market share, they wanted to bury me. You see, Eric Voss wasn't attacking Vanguard for business. He was attacking me for personal reasons. Years ago, when he was still climbing the corporate ladder, he had applied to Vanguard and was rejected. Rumor had it, Derek himself had laughed him out of the room. Now, with Derek gone, I was the face of Vanguard. And Eric wanted revenge in the cruelest way possible. I realized something that night as I sat alone in my darkened office. I wasn't the underdog anymore. I wasn't the scrappy receptionist punching up. I was the queen on the throne. And every kingdom attracted invaders. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't play defense. I had to go to war. The next morning, I called an emergency executive meeting. My team looked tense. They had been waiting for me to break down. Instead, they saw something else in my eyes. Fire. We've been reactive for too long, I told them. That ends now. Titanic's wants a fight? Fine. We'll give them one. I rolled out my plan. Aggressive partnerships with global distributors. Exclusive deals with enterprise clients. Massive investments into R&D to leapfrog Titanic's current offerings. And most importantly, a bold marketing campaign that didn't just defend Vanguard, it defended me. We called it More Than a Name. The ads were ruthless. They showcased Vanguard's innovations, our client success stories, and yes, my own journey. The tagline was simple: Madison Clark. Not just a name, not just a receptionist, a leader. Some called it risky, arrogant even, but it worked. Customers rallied. Industry forums exploded in support. Even media outlets who once doubted me began praising my resilience and boldness. But the biggest win came weeks later. Titanic faced a major scandal. One of their rushed products had a serious security flaw. Clients fled in droves. Their stock plummeted. And Eric, the man who thought he could end me, he was forced to resign after shareholders lost faith. The day the news broke, I stood in my office, staring out over the city skyline. My assistant entered, quietly, and asked if I wanted to make a public statement. I shook my head. No, I said with a small smile. Let silence be my response. For once, I didn't need words. Eric Voss had learned the hard way. You can laugh at a receptionist. You can doubt a woman. You can attack a company. But you never ever go after a queen, unless you're ready to lose. Victory, they say, is the sweetest revenge. Standing at the pinnacle of success, I thought I understood what that meant. Titanic's was gone from the picture. Eric Voss, the so-called industry shark, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale in business journals. Vanguard wasn't just surviving anymore. We were thriving, record profits, global expansion, awards piling up on my office shelves. And me, Madison Clark, once just the receptionist, was now on magazine covers labeled the Queen of Tech. But here's the thing about reaching the top. It doesn't make you feel invincible. It makes you a target. The dust had barely settled from the Titanic's war when whispers started again. Only this time they didn't come from rival CEOs or angry ex-employees. No, this came from within the walls of Vanguard itself. It began subtly. Missed deadlines, quiet resistance to new initiatives, executives second-guessing my strategies, in closed-door meetings. The same people who once feared me had grown comfortable again. Too comfortable. They weren't afraid anymore. Worse, they were growing ambitious. At first, I ignored it. I was too busy building my legacy. I had bigger plans, turning Vanguard from a tech company into a full-blown ecosystem. AI, biotech, green solutions. I saw Vanguard as the future. Not just for me, but for the world. But ambition is dangerous currency, and in the corporate world, loyalty is always for sale. One evening, long after most had left the building, I received a tip. An anonymous email, short but loaded with warning. They're plotting. Check the shareholder movements. I knew better than to ignore signs. Over the years, paranoia had served me well. I called in my legal and financial team immediately. For hours, we pored over data, cross-referencing board member activities, financial records, and whispered rumors. The result? A planned coup. Not overt like the last one. This was smarter, more calculated. Certain board members had quietly consolidated voting power. A hostile takeover wasn't coming tomorrow or next week, but the pieces were being placed. If I didn't act, I'd be dethroned. Permanently. Funny, isn't it? No matter how high you climb, you're never safe. The ghosts of ambition always circle back, but I wasn't scared. I was ready. By now, I had learned every dirty trick in the book, because I had written half of them myself. The next few weeks became a game of shadows. I made subtle moves aligning with key allies quietly. I granted promotions to loyal executives, locking them in through golden handcuffs. I initiated a massive employee stock ownership program, ensuring the very people who made Vanguard thrive now had a personal stake in keeping me in power. And when the coup attempt finally surfaced during a quarterly shareholder meeting, they never even got the chance to speak. The board stood united behind me. The ringleaders, exposed publicly, removed immediately. Their shares, bought out through emergency clauses. Their reputations, shattered overnight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply smiled. Vanguard isn't built on arrogance or backroom deals, I told the stunned audience that day. It's built on resilience, on those who rise when the world tries to keep them down. I rose, and I won't fall to cowards hiding in shadows. The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was loyal. In that moment, I realized something profound. Revenge had brought me here. Vengeance had fueled my ascent. But it was legacy that would cement my reign. I didn't need to crush every opponent to feel validated anymore. They would come and go. That was the way of business. Titans fell every day. But queens endured. Still, as I stood in my office that night, looking out over the city skyline that now seemed too small for me, I knew the story wasn't over. Enemies would come, challenges would rise, and when they did, I'd be ready. Because I wasn't just Madison Clark anymore. I was Madison Clark, Queen of Vanguard, and my legacy unbreakable. I thought I had won. I really did. After crushing the internal coup and solidifying my power at Vanguard, I believed the wars were behind me. The rivals, defeated, the doubters, silenced, the bored, loyal, or at least loyal enough not to challenge me again. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. For once, it wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about building, about securing my legacy not just as the girl who survived, but as the woman who transformed an empire. But what they don't tell you about sitting on the throne is that the higher you rise, the sharper the arrows become. And the most dangerous. Enemies. They don't wear company badges or sit in boardrooms. They operate in the shadows, in politics, in media, in places where power isn't earned, but inherited. It started subtly, like most storms do. A minor news article questioning Vanguard's corporate responsibility. Then a viral tweet accusing us of exploiting workers overseas. Entirely false, but perfectly timed. Weeks later, an independent watchdog group published a scathing report about tech monopolies, listing Vanguard at the top. I wasn't naive. This wasn't coincidence. Someone, or perhaps many, wanted me gone. And unlike Derek or Eric, this enemy didn't want my title. They wanted my reputation. They couldn't beat me in the market, so they aimed for the court of public opinion. And worse, they were winning. Overnight, journalists who once celebrated me flipped. Interviews were canceled. Politicians began calling for antitrust investigations. Vanguard's stock dipped for the first time in years, and suddenly, my inbox was filled, with board members asking, "Madison, do we have a PR strategy for this?" Of course we did. I had prepared for scandals. Every CEO does. But this felt different. This was surgical, precise, relentless, and deeply personal. I stayed calm, at least on the outside. "We're fine," I told my team. "It's noise." But at night, alone in my penthouse overlooking the city, I knew the truth. This wasn't noise. This was war. The kind of war you can't fight with press releases or product launches. The kind of war where your enemies wear smiles on television while sharpening knives behind closed doors. I hired the best crisis managers money could buy. We launched transparency campaigns, improved labor conditions, donated millions to charities. But no matter what we did, the narrative was set. Madison Clark, the ruthless queen of Vanguard, had become the villain of the tech world. And the worst part? Some part of me knew. I had helped write that narrative myself. Years of crushing rivals, firing half the company, ruling with an iron fist. I didn't regret it, but I understood how easily they could twist the story. From girl who rose from receptionist to tyrant CEO crushing the little guy. The media loves a rise, but they adore a fall, and they were hungry to see mine. But if they thought I would crumble under headlines and hashtags, they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't going to issue apologies. I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness. I had played fair once, and look where it got me. So I went back to the beginning. Strategy, precision, ruthlessness. I gathered dirt, real dirt, on the watchdog groups, the politicians, the journalists pushing this narrative. I found their weaknesses, their hypocrisies, their skeletons, and slowly, I pushed back. Anonymous leaks exposed corruption within the agencies targeting us. Scandals erupted involving key senators suddenly so concerned about tech monopolies. Media outlets found themselves covering their own missteps instead of mine. Bit by bit, the pressure eased. Titanics couldn't beat me. The coup couldn't beat me. And now, not even Washington could beat me. But it came at a price. By the time the dust settled, I wasn't Madison the visionary CEO anymore. I was something else. Something colder, harder, less beloved, but more feared. I stood on the rooftop of Vanguard one night, alone, watching the city lights flicker below. They had tried to erase me. They failed. But they had succeeded at one thing. They had changed me. Forever. Because once you've fought monsters in the dark, you realize the only way to survive is to become something darker. Power is addictive. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never really held it in their hands. The rush of making decisions that shape lives. The weight of having your words ripple across industries. The thrill of watching people fall silent when you enter a room. I lived that life. I ruled that world. For years, I wasn't just Madison Clark, the former receptionist who climbed the mountain. I was the mountain. But mountains, I learned, don't move. And sooner or later, they get weathered down. By the time the attacks ended, the political smears, the media circus, the hostile boardroom whispers, I had won. Vanguard stood taller than ever. Our market cap shattered records. Our influence was untouchable. And yet, I felt hollow. Winning felt different now. Each victory tasted less sweet, more mechanical. The hunger that once drove me had faded, replaced by endless board reports, legal battles, and smiling assassins in tailored suits. I had become exactly what I once hated: untouchable, unapproachable, alone. The realization didn't hit me in a moment of drama. No, it was far quieter. One late evening, sitting in my glass-walled office, lights of the city flickering below, I simply asked myself, what more is there left to prove? I had fought every battle. I had crushed every enemy. But wars aren't meant to last forever. And queens who cling to their thrones too long eventually fall. I wasn't going to be one of them. So, I made a decision. Not out of fear. Not out of defeat, but out of power. True power. The power to walk away. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. Within weeks, rumors spread like wildfire. Madison Clark to step down. Madison Clark planning exit strategy. Madison Clark retiring. At her peak. The media speculated endlessly. Was I pushed out? Was there a scandal? No, there was no scandal. No push, just a queen choosing her moment. At my final board meeting, I announced my departure. Faces paled. Investors begged me to reconsider. Employees sent thousands of messages pleading for me to stay. I smiled, genuinely for the first time. In years. Legacy, I told them, isn't built by clinging to power. It's built by knowing when to pass the torch. I had already groomed a successor, someone sharp, ethical, and respected. Vanguard would live on, better and stronger. As for me, I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't write a memoir. I didn't even say goodbye. I simply left. Quietly, elegantly. On my own terms. A year later, sitting on the balcony of my coastal villa, far from the noise and flashing cameras, I received an email from my successor. Vanguard had just broken yet another record. The company was thriving. My name, though no longer on the door, was etched into every corner of its success. And in the silence of that beautiful night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I had won. Not just the battles, not just the wars, but the ultimate victory. I had left while I was still a queen, because the truth is, revenge fuels you, but legacy defines you.